I'm doing right now. And also want you all to know that we're going to be sending the presentation in a PDF file to everyone after the session, most likely sometime tomorrow morning. And now I'm going to take just a quick minute, do some welcome and introductions, and I'm going to go ahead and go through all the presenters this evening as opposed to doing it before every person's presentation. So the first people that we have up, we're so excited, from Washington Headquarters Services. We have Annette Lamb, who is the Transportation Team Lead, and Hugh McGloin, who is the Transportation Program Manager. After them, we've got Desra Knowles from Commute with Enterprise, and Desra's day job, he's a Commuter Service Program Manager at the Metropolitan Transit Authority of Harris County, which is in Houston, Texas. And then we've got from VDOT giving us an I-66 hot lanes update, Susan Shaw, who is the Mega Projects Director and Design to Build Program Manager. And then to wrap things up, we've got Joe Stainsby, who is the Program Manager from Vanpool Alliance. And
Desra is actually with the ACT Vanpool Council, not Commute with Enterprise.
That's right. He is the chair of the ACT Vanpool Council. And I think I'm going to go ahead and Joe's going to share the screen with Annette and Hugh, so we'll kick off with our first presentation.
All right. Bear with me for 1 second here, everyone. And I'm going to share this. All right. And Annette, you should be able to actually unmute yourself, and you can go ahead and get started. Just let us know when you want us to move to the next slide.
Sure. Thank you, Joe. Can you hear me? I just want to confirm.
I can hear you clear as crystal.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for joining. And before I start, I want to actually Program Manager Hugh McGloin will start off with the presentation. And also, I believe our director, Ms. Regina Grant, is also on the line, so she may want to give some remarks. So, so I think, let's see, Hugh, I don't know how we're going to transition to you, or.
I mean, he should be able to just unmute himself and carry on.
Yep, you should be able to hear me. I'm
yep.
Off mute now. Hey, Ms. Grant, if you want to make any opening remarks.
Well, I'm excited about being here, and we are able to help support this again like we did last year. It's always good to get good news. Any kind of way that we can make our employees comfortable about getting back into this mode of transportation is going to be awesome. The more we talk about it, the more we make it safe, the more that the sooner that they will try to get re-engaged. So I'm excited to hear everything that you have to say. So I'm going to sit back and relax and take good notes and just be part of the process. So I appreciate you pulling this together, and thank you so much. And I'm now going on mute.
Thanks, ma'am. And just this is Hugh McGloin. So as I was introduced, I'm the program manager for the transportation branch of Washington Headquarters Service. Ms. Grant is my boss, runs a number of different functional areas of Washington Headquarters. The transportation branch is one of them. And so, as many of you know, we synchronize and manage the DoD shuttle services. We coordinate with regional transit providers. We work with our parking branch to enable van pools and car pools to come in and park, have dedicated parking spaces on the Pentagon reservation. We deal with bikers, paths. We work with VDOT, Transurban, a whole host of different organizations to try and encourage the use of a lot of different modes of transportation for our employees to the Pentagon. And Vanpool is one of them. So I don't have a whole lot of slides today. We've got two, and I'll work on the first one here and then hand it off to Annette, who I lean on heavily since I've only been the program manager for going on 3 months. And a lot of those 3 months I stare at my dining room wall here with a whole bunch of stickies on it for my whiteboard on the last 3 months. But what I'd like to do is just briefly go over our reservation reentry guide. So yeah, on that first slide right there. So back on May 26th, a couple of months into the lockdown guidance, the Pentagon released its re-entry guidance. And so the Pentagon worked, and my branch included, worked on an entire plan for employees of all the services, military and civilian and contractor support employees who work at the Pentagon, really in the NCR, Pentagon, Mark Center, and a couple of other outsites located around the National Capital Region, Crystal City, Suffolk Building, Roslyn, to name a few, what the steps would be and what to expect as they started to re-enter back into the Pentagon, and how they would be allowed to re-enter back in the Pentagon. And so from a military standpoint, a Department of Defense standpoint, we have what's called health protection conditions. And so just similar to information protection conditions and force protection conditions that deal with specific aspects of protecting ourselves, we have a health protection condition. And so we were at health protection condition Charlie plus, which is the highest is Delta. So we were pretty high, and that's when the Pentagon was on a stay-at-home. All were on stay-at-home except for essential employees, and at that point, less than about 30% of employees were coming into the Pentagon specifically, and that's pretty significant out of a base of about 26,000 employees that normally swipe into the Pentagon on any given day. We were less than at some points less than 5,000. And so, as you can imagine, everything almost stopped except for essential services. We, in the transportation branch, suspended or reduced significantly most of our inter-DoD shuttles. As you well know, that many of the regional transit providers and local transit providers reduced their transit services. So as the resilience plan came out on May 26th, it had a phased approach to employees coming back to work. And that plan was lined up with the White House's Opening Up of America guidelines, along with really the tri-state area governor's plans. I say tri-state, 2 states and a district plans of opening up the local economies and reducing restrictions on the populations in Maryland, Virginia, and the district, and some in West Virginia and Pennsylvania. We do have facilities in West Virginia and Pennsylvania as well. So right now, and we're about 2 weeks into it, we've moved to what we call phase 2. So at HPCon Charlie Plus, when we were in complete lockdown, we were at phase 0, less than 40% of people allowed into the building. Phase 1, which was health protection condition Charlie, was still at 40%. Telework was maximized telework. And now we've moved to phase 2. I think I guess we're in the second week of phase 2 now, maybe the 2.5 weeks, where we've moved to health protection condition Bravo. So our personnel caps have shifted slightly. Right now, the goal is no more than 80% of employees come into the Pentagon, and at least 20% telework. So that's a big jump from 40 and 60. I would like to say that we're nowhere near that 80% coming into the building, right? We've capped out, I think last week we had a high of 48% coming in. And many of those that come in, we're staggering our hours. So many are working in the morning and leaving in the mid-afternoon. And then some are coming in a little bit later, mid-morning, and leaving later in the afternoon towards about the evening rush. So we're kind of doing staggered workforce inside the building. And both the Pentagon and the Mark Center, there's not a whole lot of things opened up. Most of the food venues are still closed. There's a select few open up to help service the employees that are coming in. Most everybody who's coming in is bringing their lunch or stretching out their work hours and leaving at around 2 to go home and have lunch, a late lunch, and finish up the day teleworking. We think that this will be a long, and it's hard to really give you an idea of how long we'll be in health protection condition Bravo or our phase 2, when we'll move to phase 3. At phase 3 is HPCon Alpha. That's really our point, which the DoD says, okay, we're generally close to normal how we operate, or near normal, and there's very little restrictions. There may be some continued cleaning requirements, but social distancing is been relaxed. And so I think, pretty good guess on my part, to think that we'll be in this health protection condition Bravo for a good several months. And that includes, because the DoD is also looking at things, what's happening around on the economy, in public transportation. And so many of the regional providers aren't coming back up to start to increase their service till towards the end of August. As we all know, in the area, schools are looking to do everything. Almost, I've heard, is all online, or a very small percentage of them will go to an in-person instruction for a couple of days a week. And so our employees, many of them who are dual income or single parent incomes, they rely on schools to take the kids for most of the day so they can come to work. So I think we'll be teleworking at a very significant portion of the workforce for several months as we continue to watch the waves of the pandemic come and go. And we're seeing what's happening out in the West and the southern states now, maybe a second wave, if you will. So back to the transportation piece of this. Vanpooling, we have not discouraged it. We have not encouraged it. We know there are still vanpoolers and carpoolers coming to the Pentagon. They still have their parking permits that are active, and there's still dedicated spaces for those employees who choose to vanpool and carpool. What we have discouraged is slugging. What we know is discouraged is people wanting to get on mass transit, whether it's a bus or a rail, because you don't necessarily know who you're with. But we do find, and we have heard, that those folks who generally vanpooled and carpooled together, to a greater extent, are continuing to use that service, because, as you and I know, if you know a person more familiar, you're willing to take some more risk. And really, it's all about risk and safety of the employee. And so we understand that. We did publish a re-entry guide to assist employees returning to the building, and specifically, you'll see a couple of cutouts there on the bottom right of the slide, specifically dealing with transportation, where we update it on a regular basis, at least weekly, to address any changes in public transportation that are happening. I go back to vanpooling. Vanpooling, the mass transit benefits program that assists or subsidizes employees' transportation in. Many who were using it to get them smart benefits on WMATA or regional transit providers have asked to suspend their benefits, while we see a lot who are getting benefits to transition over to a Vanpool provider are still accepting benefits. So at this point, I'll transition to Annette, who'll take us into the second slide with some guidance.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. As Hugh has said, we haven't really promoted, but we haven't discouraged ride sharing, carpooling, and vanpooling. But with the pandemic, the priority is safety, and it's about people's comfort level and their level of taking risk. With Vanpool, the people riding with you every day, so you may be more comfortable. But so some of our really our messaging to our population is really focused on safety based on the CDC guidance, and also information actually from Joe and Holly from Vanpool Alliance, and also some of the information published in ACT. So this slide is kind of what are some of the safety and best practices for using Vanpool, and we put these out on our newsletter and also from our social media website venue. So like the first one is to possibly discuss with your supervisor to support a staggered schedule. So the whole goal is to you can't really reduce it to just like one or two people, but you reduce the number of people in a van, then the distancing will be maximized. So, you feel safer. And then by staggering the schedule, that may work better with a Vanpool formation. The second one is, pretty obvious, and just kind of, making sure that, all the Vanpool providers and also riders are keeping, the inside of the vehicles and also outside clean. Because I think, some people actually want to see that is clean. So again, it's based on people's comfort level and, risk tolerance. And also, some of the things that, and this is kind of more for providers, if you have extra vehicles, and people may want to know that you have an extra vehicle in case, there's, you have an incident, or you may know someone may show symptoms but not sure, you just don't feel comfortable, you can replace a vehicle quickly. And of course, just encourage everyone to wear face coverings while in the van and around other passengers. And in fact, on the Pentagon reservation, if you're on your reservation, even in mass transit centers like our Pentagon Transit Center, or right outside getting on the steps to the Pentagon, you're required to wear face covering. And stay home if you're sick. So so these are the messages that everyone is sending around, but we are reminding everyone constantly that you need to practice this to maintain safety. So that's kind of what we have done on the Vanpool awareness. So and today I think what we want to kind of find out from everyone later on is how are you supporting the Vanpool riders, and what are some of the measures that you're doing to help keep people safe. So Joe, that's all I have for this slide.
Sorry about that. I muted myself and was fumbling around for the key to unmute myself. So thank you, Hugh and Annette, very much. So we're going to move on now to Desra, who, as Holly mentioned, is the chair of the ACT Vanpool Council and is also heavily involved with vanpooling in the Houston area. So I'll go right over to you, Desra. You should be able to unmute yourself.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you guys for having me. And I think originally Michelle was supposed to do this presentation, and she had a emergency dental procedure. So, and I didn't want her to be on here and be on the good medicine and tell you guys something totally wrong about Vanpool. So,
yeah, right.
So I stepped in for her. You can go to the next slide, Joe. As Joe stated, my name is Desra Knowles, and I chair the ACTS, the Association for Commuter Transportation's Vanpool Council, and I also am the program manager for Metro Star, which is the regional Vanpool provider for Houston, Harris County, and the Metropolitan Transit Authority there in Houston, Harris County as well. Let's see here. Just a couple of things that we're going to kind of talk about. I'll just give for those that, for the benefit of those who may not know, I'll give you a little bit of background on, let's see, I can't see that. Bring that up a little closer. There we go. I'll give you some background on the COVID impact, some of the things that we're hearing on a national level in regards to COVID, as well as some of the things that we have experienced here in Houston. In our region. It's been pretty interesting. Then I'll give you some updates on some of the policy changes that we're hearing and some of the things that we're working on in the background as a commuter transportation organization, some of the things that we're trying to make sure stay in the forefront and to represent Vanpools in the best way on a legislative scene. And then we'll wrap up with questions, which I think we're going to move the questions to the end of all of our presentations. You can go to the next slide. So just a little bit about the council. Right now we have roughly, I think it's about 138 organizations that are a part. It's a very diverse group of individuals who are part of the council. lots of different positions, lots of different regions. And so it's a great thing because we get a chance to hear different perspectives from around the country. No Vanpool program, what I found, no program is the same. And so we're facing similar things, but no program is really the same. Everybody is kind of moving differently. And so it's been very interesting to be a part of this council and to hear different perspectives of things that are going on around the country. And of course, we have an international conference that happens every year where we get a chance to normally, in the normal circumstances, we would come together. It was supposed to be in Denver this year. So we would have all come together, and it's a great thing to get everybody in the room, and everybody in that room is talking about Vanpool. So it's one of the only organizations that really push and promote Vanpool as a mode of transit and really highlights our mode of transit. So it's a very interesting organization to be a part of. Okay, next slide. So just to give you a little bit of background on some of the things that have kind of transpired over the last couple of months. Kind of on the West Coast, I'll kind of do it by regions. On the West Coast, King County Metro, which everyone knows is the largest Vanpool program in the country, they kind of led us off. You know, they were the kind of the leading organization who was one of the first in the forefront out there to step out and kind of make some changes that many of us followed those changes and started to adapt to some of the things that they did initially. They started out by subsidizing seats for Vanpool riders who some were afraid to ride, some were unable to ride because of childcare issues. So they were the first to subsidize their seats. They were kind of one of the first. I know Joe had some material that I saw very early on that we were able to take and kind of craft our message based on it. But we saw some marketing collateral from King County Metro really early on. And King County Metro was also one of the first to start to report about their idle vehicles that they had. And so, you know, when they started to report it, we immediately started to see that trend kind of take place across the country where vans quickly became idled. We quickly had to devise a plan on how we're going to, you know, sustain our programs, who's going to continue riding. I know I can speak for Houston. We immediately started we call it a Save My Seat program, where our riders could let us know, hey, for whatever reason, I'm not going to be able to ride right now, but I want you to save my seat. I intend to come back to Vanpool when the opportunity is made available to me. And then we also had Hold My Van, where we had entire groups of people who said, hey, we're not allowed to come to our building right now, but we fully intend, Vanpool is our thing, we are coming back. So if you could just hold our van for us and we'll be back. And so in exchange for holding those vehicles, we got a commitment from the Vanpoolers in which they've done an amazing job of checking in with us every week, just saying, hey, we're still on hold. Our company is telling us this, or we're hearing this from our company. So, you know, continue to hold us. We're still intend to come back. And we've heard from some who said, you know, it doesn't look as if we're going to be able to come back this year. They're holding us out until 21. So, you know, we want to go ahead and terminate our Vanpool. But when the opportunity presents itself, we intend to come back, but we don't want you to keep it on hold any longer. And then in California, we heard some things about some employers were paying for seats, but they didn't know how long they were going to be able to do that. ACT also put out some guidance. They put, I don't know if you guys have seen that guidance, but they put out a great piece that kind of walked through each mode, telework, vanpool, carpool, public transit, shuttles. It's a great piece that they kind of gave some guidance on how each mode could kind of move through this COVID piece. And from my understanding, they're preparing a part 2 to that as we go, you know, move further in the phase of this COVID. They're planning a part 2. So if you guys have not seen that, Joe, I would encourage you to maybe share it with the group if you haven't already, so that they could.
Yeah, I will make sure that goes out. I didn't read the entire document, just kind of selfishly the part that pertained to Vanpools, but it is very well produced and excellent advice. I did disseminate it to some individuals, but maybe not to everyone. I will make sure that it is available to all of the people who participate in this call today. So carry on.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I agree with you. It was a very awesome piece. And so then we started to see some, some people we started to hear about reopening. And then as quickly as we heard about the reopening, we heard about employers start to shut down again. We here in our region, we have ExxonMobil is one of our Vanpool customers, and we heard about them reopening their campus. And they have a campus of 13,000 people north of Houston, and we heard about them opening back up their campus. And I was like, oh wow, that's interesting. But as quick as we heard that, we got again a note from them saying, okay, no, we're not going to be opening up our campus. Some things change, and so just as quickly as that happened, we started to see a shutdown again, and we had to quickly adapt our program to make a kind of a long range plan. Okay, what do we plan to do? And so we started out with about 535 Vanpools, which is our normal program runs. And we quickly saw, right now, I think we have 194 that are operating. And most of those 194 are essential employees. We have the Texas Medical Center. We have a large VA medical center, VA hospital that's included in the Texas Medical Center. And most of the vans that are operating for us are essential employees. There are medical, there are some government organizations also that are required to report in. And so they're still operating and still using their Vanpools. Let's see, we can go to the next slide. So how is everyone addressing social distancing? I know in our region, we are providing the additional vehicle. And it's been very interesting that most of the, like I stated, most of our people are essential employees. So they're the medical. So right now we have a total of 10 social distancing vehicles is what we're calling them, where we've provided an extra vehicle so that groups could separate. These are normally larger groups, and these groups have agreed to separate. And so none of them are really running at a full capacity. I think the most we have on any van is maybe 4, where we've split them into 2. And we've seen quite a bit of low ridership. A lot of those vans are unable to operate at full capacity, of course, because a lot of the administrative staff that were riding on Vanpools, of course, they're all being allowed to work from home. And so we have a lot of nurses and a lot of people who are in charge of care of patients, who are the ones who are having to come in, and most of the administrative staff are being allowed to stay home. And so that's a large part of our population that are not Vanpooling at this time. So we have some vans where 4 of the people are going in, and then we have other people who are saying, hey, I'm gonna please hold my seat. I'm not being permitted to come into the building right now, or coming to the medical center right now. Some of the things that we're doing the social distancing vehicles. We went the extra mile in Houston. I can speak for our program. We went the extra mile. We hand delivered, of course, with social distance. We hand delivered some personal protective equipment to our Vanpools, some disinfectant kits for their vehicles. And we had overwhelming response to that. The customers were really, really pleased that we took the time to personally deliver, 190 plus of them, that we went to individual places and met them in parking lots and left them in loading docks. And so we went to great lengths to make sure that they knew that we cared about their safety, and that we wanted them to have masks, we wanted them to have gloves. And as the previous young lady spoke, we wanted to make sure that they understood the importance of making sure that the vehicle was disinfected in the morning, making sure that the vehicle was disinfected in the evening, and that, you know, if you're sick, stay home. We even went so far as to make a decal that could go inside the vehicle that reminds them of all those same things. So every day that they get on and off of the vehicle, they look in the window and they see that decal that tells them, you're not feeling well, stay home. Make sure you wash your hands, sanitizer, wear your mask. So we're reminding them, and that is going to become a part of our normal everyday. Even after this pandemic has, quote unquote, moved on, we're still going to be talking about, hey, wash your hands. The hygiene thing is permanently ingrained in how we talk about Vanpool and how we talk about commuting in general. We've decided to make that a part of our normal conversation going forward. Let's see here. So what we're hearing is a lot of people they're saying that they're not even entertaining bringing people back until at least October. We're hearing some November, like I stated earlier. Some companies are saying they're not coming back until they're not even talking about it until 2021. And so we've had to adapt our program. And one of the things that I was excited about the other day, we were on a call for the Vanpool Council, and I saw Felicia's face on here. Felicia's on here. Felicia gave us an interesting concept. And so I think this pandemic will forever change how we talk about Vanpool. It'll be important for us to change how we communicate. It's a great time for us to kind of refresh how we talk about, how we market this mode of transit. I think it was long due for a refresh. And so this has given us a good opportunity. I know in Houston, we're working hard in the background to use this pause, if you will, to change quite a few things about our program. We're taking a look back at some of the survey data that we received from our riders. We're addressing some of those hot button issues that they say, you know, hey, Vanpool would be a whole lot greater if you guys did X, Y, Z. And we're taking this downtime, if you will, to address those things, make changes in our policy, look at, do we want to change our branding, all different types of things. And so one of the things that Felicia came up with was kind of thinking of Vanpool as a pod, if you will, of the same people that you're used to riding with. You know these people. You all have kind of mutually agreed on, hey, we're going to wear a mask. We're going to take these steps to clean our vehicle. We're going to make sure that we're communicating about illness, illness and people that are connected to you, any type of exposure. We're going to communicate that, and we're going to make sure that our pod is safe, and that we're making sure, because a lot of this, what I found with this coronavirus, is a lot of it is it's forcing people to improve how they communicate. How you talk about things, how you address these different areas that we probably never would have talked about. I know in Houston, we've had some instances where we had to address, unfortunately, someone's personal hygiene on a vehicle. And so it sometimes it rose to the level of a phone call to me. And, I unfortunately would have to call an individual, and as politically as correct as I could, to address, hey, there seems to be an issue. We're going to have to fix this issue to continue your participation in the program. And so, people understand. I've never had anybody that I've had to present that to that didn't understand. But now it's forced us to be more conscious about washing your hands. Something that you didn't think that you would ever have to remind people to do, but we're having to do that. And so now we're talking about how to put that into our marketing material, and how to, forever make that become a part of how you talk about Vanpool. You can go to the next slide, Joe. All right, that's what I just discussed. You can go one more. So some of the public policy updates, some of the things that we're hearing about the FTA guidance that has come forward, and we're hearing that they're basically going to use the information, the data from FY19, and that will carry over into FY22. So they're just going to basically use the same information that was submitted, because everybody's numbers. I know you guys' numbers are probably all over the place. Ours are all over the place. And so it wouldn't be a very good reflection if we had to submit anything right now, because it's just the numbers have, the ridership numbers for every mode of transit I know in Houston have just dropped. And so it would be very difficult for us to try to explain any of those things. And so the FTA has issued some guidance on that. It'll be very interesting for transit agencies as well. Their guidance, from my understanding, is still being crafted, and there are going to be some different pieces that are going to come out here very shortly that are going to specifically address some of those low ridership things. We have, as a Vanpool Council, we have approached ACT to use its legislative arm to bring up that we need some sort of guidance on the ridership question. You know, is this the time to redefine what the ridership, you know, will be? We know that a Vanpool, you know, has to have a certain number of riders to be considered a Vanpool. And so, you know, is this the time for that to be redefined? And so as a Vanpool Council, we have pushed up to ACT, our national office, to say, hey, you know, at some point, we're going to need some sort of guidance on these changes, because this coronavirus, this pandemic has forever changed what we see as transit, what we see as Vanpool, what we see as carpool, all of these things, telework, you know, all of these things are forcing organizations and companies to say, hey, we may need to change the way this is considered. And so we've been in discussions with that, with everything going on around the INVEST Act. Things are very interesting, political climate. So, you know, everything is kind of jockeying for priority right now. And so that is one of the things that I wanted you to know, that we are pushing as a council, that we need, you know, more guidance from the federal level as how we will look at this going forward. Let's see, next slide. I think that might have been.
Yep, that's it, Desiree.
That was it. All right.
So thank you so much, Desiree. I will just say that our Vanpool Alliance project staff do participate in the in ACT and heavily on the ACT Vanpool Council. I am the secretary of the ACT Vanpool Council. So for those vendors on the phone, any and all of the issues and concerns that you might have, I run those up to the ACT Vanpool Council through you. So that means just make sure you're getting in touch with me, and anything that comes down from them, I will make sure it gets to you. So next we will move on to Susan Shaw, who has graciously agreed to give us an update on the 66 construction outside the Beltway. So without further ado, we'll go over to you, Susan.
Okay, great. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you great.
We can hear you.
Great. So thanks for having me. And I have a lot of slides, but I'm gonna go through them quickly so that I will definitely keep to my 20 minutes. But I might be saying next slide quite a bit. So next slide. Just a reminder of our project scope and what we're doing in the 66 quarter. We're working to construct 22.5 miles of a system that will have 2 express lanes in each direction. When we open at the end of 2022, we will be converting the quarter to HOV3. Today it's HOV2 out there. And so if you meet the HOV3 requirement in the new express lanes that we complete, you'll be able to travel for free. And then the tolls will be dynamic, similar to other systems in the Northern Virginia region, 95, 395, and 495, where they will be congestion-based tolls. And then, of course, we'll still continue to maintain our 3 regular lanes in each direction. In terms of transit service, we are looking to modify bus service in the corridor to increase it. We're also providing park and ride facilities in the corridor. And then we have TDM strategies that go hand in hand with the system that we're developing. And then we also will be providing bike and pedestrian trails along the corridor. And just on the next slide, just talks about the fact that this is a public-private partnership. It's a $2.3 billion construction program that also included additional funds that were provided by the concession fee. We had $500 million that was dedicated for transportation needs along the corridor, and then another a total of $850 million that is going to go towards transit, and once the system is up and running. And so just the next slide kind of shows where we're at right now in our development. So today, I think everybody's aware that the Orange Line did shut down on Memorial Day. It's closed through Labor Day, and we are coordinating quite a bit of work in and around that area. We have bridges over the WMATA tracks. We're trying to take advantage of their shutdown since their rail system is de-energized, and we don't have to be so concerned about working over the tracks. And then you'll see there's some other, we do have some work around the 28 interchange in November to have the signals removed off of the 28 corridor. We did open a new ramp last week. There's a new flyover ramp at that interchange that takes you from eastbound 66 to northbound 28. And then we show the express lanes opening at the end of December 2022. In terms of our transportation management plan on the next slide, during construction, you know, I know Desiree talked about adapting and being flexible, which, you know, we had strategies that made sense pre-COVID that we are still maintaining our budgets for our next fiscal year, which began July 1st, not really knowing exactly how all of that's going to play out in the coming months. So we had fare subsidies for bus service in the corridor. We have incentives for new carpoolers, and then we also had incentives for new van pools that formed. So we're continuing to keep those budgets available, but it is something that we're continuing to look at since the travel in the corridor has changed so much. And so now on the next slide, just to talk a little bit about some of the construction that's happening in the corridor. Back in October, we opened a new parking lot out in the Gainesville area. It's right, you can see that blue arrow. It's about 1,900 parking spaces. We opened about 1,000 in October. Ultimately, there'll be direct access to the express lanes, but right now that access isn't there. And when we opened, I will say we started out, we only had like 5 cars in it, but once bus service started operating out of there, we were getting about 500 cars a day parking at that parking lot. So that was an early milestone, again, to try to give space for commuter buses, kiss and ride areas, but it also was supporting car, Vanpool, and local shuttles as well. So on the next slide is the Balls Ford Park and Ride lot. That's not required to open until 2022 when the system opens, but it's under construction today. They've already got asphalt down on the base course for that lot and are continuing to work on that. That lot also will have brand new access to and from the east in the median there on 66. So it'll make very convenient for, again, carpool, van pooling. And we are setting up those lots to provide for those types of circulation that you would need for our informal carpooling, although that's not currently, you know, one of the modes that's being promoted right now, but we do have it set up so that that could occur in both of those slots. To just talk a little bit about some other improvements at Route 28, oh, sorry, 234 business. You can see there we've actually built a new bridge. We haven't done the approach work yet. This is looking, that aerial shot that you see is looking to the east. So we're continuing to work on that, adding a new collector distributor road in there that will make ease some of the congestion that you see on the general purpose lanes today. At Route 28, on the next slide, there you can see, again, a flyover or an aerial photo where you can see that new flyover ramp, which goes off to the right and then swings around up and over Route 28. So before, you went underneath the 28 bridge and did a loop to get up onto 28. So huge improvement, I think, in terms of travel and easing that movement, which is a very heavy movement. And the work on the 28 corridor continues all the way up to the Stonecroft area and up to Westfields Boulevard. We have a new park access at E.C. Lawrence Park that's been opened. Again, this area, if you're familiar with it, has huge amounts of congestion, lots of travel that moves through here in exchanging either continuing on east on 66, but there's also a lot of movement to and from the north and to and from the south during both the AM and the PM peak areas. So this interchange, there's probably about $300 to $400 million worth of infrastructure that's being invested in this interchange. The next slide shows the Route 50 interchange. Again, new ramps that are going in there, and also a shared use path. Moving on to the 123 interchange. I did want to talk about this a little bit because there is going to be, this interchange will completely change in terms of configuration, and there will be express lane access both to and from the east and also to and from the west, which makes it, very conducive for if there are buses and much easier for car and van pools to access in and out of this area at 123. There is a trail that winds through this interchange, and where we're providing a trail in an interchange area like this, we're making all of the intersections will be grade separated so that you won't be crossing traffic. Moving on to Vaden Drive Bridge. This is in the, right at the metro station there at Vienna. And we did close that bridge in October of 2019. We worked very closely with both the county and WMATA, Fairfax County and WMATA to close that bridge, but it made it a lot easier to get the work done more quickly and to lessen the impact to the traveling public. Now, that was all before we even knew that the Orange Line was shutting down. It was also, of course, before we knew anything about COVID. But you can see there the beams going up. I think we have a couple more beams to be lifted into place. Those are generally occurring overnight hours to complete that work. And that bridge is planned to open to traffic in the fall of this year. I will say for all of our work along the corridor, we have really ramped up quite significantly this summer. The other thing that we're doing is working to take advantage of the lower traffic volumes in the corridor, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. And so the next slide shows our Nutley Street interchange. That was a design that we modified after the project was first designed. There was a diverging diamond at this interchange, but the design builder reviewed that and came up with this new concept that actually moves traffic more efficiently in that area. And so that work is really just getting underway. We've done a few modifications there at the interchange as we work to transition. But we've been trying to keep the work at this area somewhat limited since we also have the Vaden Drive Bridge closed. And this is one of those alternate routes for, especially for buses in and out of the Vienna Metro Station. The next slide shows, I think we jumped to the Beltway there, and there are a number of ramps and bridges that are under construction. This is one of the more complex areas, and I would expect to see this work in this area, which is also, of course, over the metro tracks, will continue all the way through to 2022. And so one of the things that we've been doing in terms of adapting in the corridor on the next slide is we have had a temporary closures of our HOV lane in certain areas of the corridor. And we've been looking at travel volumes and peaks, average daily traffic, as well as peaks, and watching how the traffic has been adapting over time. But because of those lower volumes, we were able to allow construction to advance much more quickly than we otherwise would have been able to do. So we've created space for some pavement reconstruction of the new general purpose lanes, bridge reconstruction. We currently have an HOV lane closure at I-66 East and West near Route 50, and then also in that area as you approach the Beltway. And when we've done that, we now have a focused group that's monitoring safety operations in the corridor and this reduction of traffic, what the impacts are as we move through the changes in travel patterns. And so we're just closely monitoring that. We meet every Tuesday morning to review the previous week's traffic volumes to see if we can continue with our current program. Right now, we're planning to continue this through the middle of August. And then when we get to the middle of August, I think we will reevaluate and see where we're at. Of course, a lot of what may impact our travel patterns in the corridor depend on what the federal government is doing, what the school systems are doing, in terms of how our peaks are being impacted in the corridor. So we're just continuing to monitor closely. Next slide. Just a reminder, we do have a project website that has a lot of information about construction activities, lane closures, traffic changes. We do anticipate during August, we have a number of beam lifts that will happen. These are generally going to be overnight. We're looking at beam lifts at Gallows Road, which is right there at the Dunloring Metro Station. We also have Waples Mill, which is over 66. Cedar Bridge, which we also closed the Cedar Bridge after some further coordination with Fairfax County. And then up on 28 Braddock Road. And so most of these are occurring overnight. We generally are doing a short-term stoppage of traffic that's like 20 to 30 minutes, and then we release and let people go. But if you're traveling on this corridor, especially this next few months, at night, I would encourage you to check our website. And then we show, there is an opportunity to sign up for updates and get emails and notices about what's coming up on the project. In terms of our TMP strategies and updating those, like I talked about in the next slide, you'll see we are monitoring traffic quite a bit, looking at how it changes in these three. We've divided the corridor up into three segments. There's different travel patterns that we're finding. We're looking at those peak directions. We're also looking at how travel is different on the weekends. And so I can talk just a little bit about the trends we're seeing. So the next slide shows us looking at, this is the picking just the peak hour and looking at the travel times. And so you can see those high peaky things on the left-hand side. That was pre-COVID for both the eastbound and the westbound. And then you can see that after COVID, we dropped way down. And it's kind of slowly climbing back up, but it's a little bit too small to see, but what we're showing are average travel times in the quarter. So we're starting to get into where we used to be routinely in like the 40 to 50 minute time frame. This is an end-to-end travel time. We're now, down in the 20 to 30 minutes, and we're starting to creep up into 30 minutes, but we're not seeing, we're still well below what the peaks used to be in terms of travel time. The other thing that you don't see with this slide, but we'll show with the next slide, is that our peak period used to extend much longer than 1 hour. And now we're seeing that it's not lasting as long. So this just shows a week-on-week average in each of the quarter throughout the day. So on the left side is in the early morning in the eastbound, and you can see that peak, the top line is the most recent week. So you can see how it's kind of inched up week after week in each of those segments. I think what's interesting here is that you can see segment 1 and segment 2 are much closer to the shaded gray line there in the background than segment 3, which segment 3 is that last segment between Nutley and the Beltway. And that still is pretty far below, what travel patterns used to be in this quarter in the eastbound direction. And then the same thing in the westbound direction. You can see that same travel pattern. So again, this is just one of the metrics that we're using to continue to monitor and see, how we're doing. The other thing I would note is that generally speaking, in segment 1 and segment 2, the middle of the day is filled back in just to like what it used to be. And so we're seeing a lot more, we think it's different types of trips, maybe home-based trips where people are, out and about during the midday, but maybe it's not a work-based trip. It also could be based on people staggering their work hours in a different manner than what they used to do. In terms of TDM strategies, we still are, these are the strategies that we were supporting previously: Fairfax Connector, Omni Ride, Front Royal Commuter Bus. We currently we're not doing the Front Royal Commuter Bus right now. The one change I will say on Vanpool formation, that's not been a super successful strategy for us. I think we have 2 Vanpools we're supporting. We've had a minimum capacity or seats filled of 5. We have lowered that to 3 during the COVID. So we do still have 2 Vanpools that we're supporting. We also had a program for reaching out to employers to encourage teleworking. And that also seems like a strategy that we need to revisit since, everyone's teleworking for other reasons. So I think in terms of the strategy, it's something that we're still we're evaluating. Now we did leave it in as a budgeted item, but we're looking closely at that for the coming months. The next slide. The other things that we've done in the quarter is VSP supplemental coverage and additional SSP patrols. We've continued to support those because we do have reduced shoulders, very minimal shoulders, I will say, in the quarter, and we want to make sure people can get out of the road quickly and have that support in the quarter. We also saw early on, and I would say we continue to see that, is generally higher speeds because there was less traffic. Okay, next slide. And so I talked a little bit about employer outreach, which is mainly focused on the teleworking, something that we're re-looking at, paid media promotion, project communication. So we're still using all of those tools. And just in terms of our budget, it is a project, our budget is project-based. We have annual spending plans that we're, continuing to plan that we will get back to pre-COVID spending levels, but we are trying to be very judicious about what the need and make sure our program is matched to what the needs are in the quarter. And so we are continuing to work with our partners at DRPT and our local agencies as well to make sure that our program is properly focused. So with that, that's a quick update on 66.
Thank you so much, Susan. That was great. Something that you said made me think of something I wanted to just share with the team. Two quick things, actually. But Susan's presentation referenced the Bowles Ford commuter lot, and I just wanted to point out that OmniRide has a Western facility that's currently basically finished. We're going to move in the November timeframe, and it is a stone's throw from that university commuter lot. So we're going to be able to use that a lot with our Western service. And we're excited because currently people may not know all of the service on the Western side of the county originates on the Eastern side of the county, which means bus drivers have to show up at about 3 in the morning to start the buses and get over to the Western side. Joe and I are painfully aware because we did some social distancing outreach last week to welcome customers back, because 2 weeks ago we started service at the level of what we call our Friday service, and that's at about 85% of pre-COVID service levels. And we were out there for the first bus of the day, which left at 4:55. So a little painful, but it was great. People were there, and not at the level that we had pre-COVID, but there were still people getting up that early in the morning to get on the bus to the Pentagon in DC. So that was exciting to see. And also wanted to share, because a number of people have referenced ACT. That's the Association for Commuter Transportation. And as the name implies, it's a transportation-focused association. And Annette mentioned it. She's a member. Joe and I are also members. We've got some friends at VDOT that are members. And so I just wanted to mention that there is a Chesapeake chapter of ACT. We're one of the largest chapters. And we're going to include some information on ACT with the information that Joe's going to send out tomorrow by way of the slide. So if anybody is interested in learning more about ACT, they can do so. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Joe.
All right. Let me start my video so I can give everyone the dubious pleasure of seeing me do this. All right. Wonderful. So I was gonna keep things short and sweet, which I guess is not typically my style, but I wanted to give people a kind of an overview of where we are, a Vanpool State of the Union, if you will. But I also wanted to leave plenty of time for people to ask questions, not just of myself and Holly, but also from our presenters. So if people have been taking notes, then that would be great. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of our stuff. I wanted to start off first by just acknowledging the passing of kind of one of the main big pillars of vanpooling in Northern Virginia, that being Yvonne Jackson of YEJ Vans. I know that a great number of people on the phone, on the line, will know who she is and have worked with her a lot over the years. She's been in vanpooling since it was a much smaller thing in this area, and she will certainly be missed. I know I don't have to say that to all you guys who know her just as well as I do, in many cases more. So it would be remiss of me if I didn't mention her, so I wanted to do that. She will be missed. For van pooling. This was mentioned earlier. I believe it was Hugh that was mentioning how, you know, the amount of people who were still taking van pools was somewhat higher than the amount of people who've been taking metro and maybe taking some of the commuter buses. And that certainly is the case. I mean, whilst metro and, for example, OmniRide have been down 90 to 95% for the entirety of this COVID pandemic, van pooling has been down about 80 to 85%. So still horrifically bad, of course. I'm not saying it's not been that, but generally speaking, you know, Vanpool Alliance, of the 700 odd vans that we have enrolled in the program, about 150 of those have been going every day. I will say, and this dovetails with kind of a point that that Ezra made, is that the vast majority of those van pools that have been going up and down the road on a daily basis have not actually been operating as legal van pools, right? They have had one person in, they've had two people in, you've had three people in a 15-passenger van, and it is wonderful that ACT National is dealing with that, working with the FTA, because we will need to get some kind of waiver, change, permanent change, suspension of what is considered the definition of a van pool, because for programs like Vanpool Alliance that rely on their existence on being able to report Vanpool specific data to the National Transit Database, even if you have 150, 200 vans driving around the region, but they're not operating at capacities that would make them legal van pools, then you cannot report that data to the NTD, which means you cannot in the long term generate revenue and therefore pay the stipend that Vanpool Alliance pays. Now, that in the short term has been mitigated by, again, as Ezra said, the FTA stepping in and saying, okay, look, we're going to guarantee your earnings baseline off your FY19 data. So if you submit something in FY20 that's going to be less than FY19, and it definitely is going to be less than FY19, then we will take your FY19 data as a baseline and we'll pay you based off that, which is great because, you know, it does go some way to securing the future of programs like this. Fortunately, you know, for Vanpool Alliance, you know, it generates 5 or 6 times the amount of money that it pays out, right? So our break, we can afford, if you will, to have 100, 200 vans out there and the program will still operate. It's obviously much better if there are 5, 6, 700 of them out there, but it's not the end of the world if there aren't. So other things I wanted to mention, the EVRA payments that we made, the Emergency Vanpool Relief Assistance payments, a good amount of you on the phone will have received those. That was $500 per van up to a capped amount of, I think, $20,000. And we did 2 rounds of those payments. And that was something that we worked out with the state to be able to do those. And we were able to do those relatively quickly. Those were done in April and May. Those, there will not be any more of those because the grant that we used to do those payments, DRPT has asked us to not bill to those grants. Because they're lacking revenue projections. So until they know exactly where they stand, they don't want people doing any more of that stuff. Other things that we've been doing, obviously, as you guys know, we are waiving the monthly reporting requirements for the program. You know, you have to submit your report, but even if you are submitting your report and there is 0 data on that report, you went 0 miles, we are still paying you. The reason that I have that on there is just to illustrate a point. We don't have our data for June yet because the deadline is actually this evening. So if there's any of you on the phone who haven't submitted your reports yet, make sure you get them in by midnight. But for May, for example, we paid out about $130,000 in our regular monthly payment, which is perfectly bog standard. However, if we were enforcing our normal requirements for occupancy levels and, you know, ridership and miles and this, that, and the other, we only would have paid out about $3,000, right? So we only had $3,000 worth, if you will, of van pools that were actually traveling as eligible van pools around the region. So every month that the program does that, it's basically losing about $110,000 every month that it does that. We have committed to doing that through at least September. And it's worth mentioning that that is September reporting, which of course you won't do until October, and you won't get the check until November. Okay. So our hope is that by the time that comes round, sorry, I slipped out of frame there, but by the time October, November comes round, there are enough van pools that are back up and running to where we don't have to continue to do that. So that's something that we will continue to revisit as when we see how things are ticking back up. If they are ticking back up, if we go into another, another second trough, if you will, then obviously that's something that we would look to extend. But for right now, I can say that we certainly would be doing it through September reporting. So in the sense that that gives you, a level of comfort and predictability for money coming in, then certainly you can take that. Moving on, the PPE. Desra and obviously in Houston, they did a great job, apparently better job than we've done of actually acquiring PPE and getting it out to their van pools as quickly as possible. Ours has not been through any lack of trying. It's simply on the timelines of actually getting everything. We have procured a large, so I believe it's a liter bottle of hand sanitizer for every van that participates in this program. So that's 700 and some odd half-liter bottles of hand sanitizer. And we also have enough for every single van pooler that is enrolled in this program to have 2 cloth reusable masks. In fact, actually, you'll see a picture of one just popped up on the screen. That is a demo unit. We have not actually received the main shipment of them yet. They are supposed to be coming in at the end of this week. And when they do, you will be getting them delivered by myself. So there'll be the Joseph Stainsby parcel delivery service next week. So the idea is that we will meet you at your place of business if you're a van pool company that actually has an office and staff. If not, we will probably be leaving them with you at your home addresses that we have registered on your W-9s. And obviously the hand sanitizer is of course simply meant to be a start. It is not meant to be an exhaustive supply, but those masks can be used in perpetuity. They are designed to be worn for a couple of days and then washed, which is why we're going to be giving you 2. And the numbers that we're going to be giving you are provided based off the amount of vans that you have in the system with us. So if you have, 300 people in our system, you're going to be getting 600 masks. And we had considered potentially having something where you came to the transit center and picked them up. But one, we thought that maybe that presented more risk in terms of contamination than we were comfortable with. And also us delivering them to you means, most importantly, that we get rid of them, because it will not shock you to know that I do not have place in my office for 14,000 masks and 750 liter bottles of hand sanitizer. So it is imperative now that we have those in hand to get those out to you. This will look terrible, I'm sure, on my camera here, but you will also be getting one of these for every single one of your vans. This is a plasticified, pretty sure that's not a word, but pretend it is, plastic covered rear mirror hanging tag, which has in it best practices for how to wear your mask, how to wipe down hard surfaces in the van. Much like the decal that Desra mentioned earlier, the idea is it goes off the rear view mirror in the van. It is important to mention that in Virginia, it is not legal to drive with something like this hanging from your rear view mirror. So this is something that can go in the van for reference, but it needs to be taken down when you're actually driving the vehicle. So we will also be delivering those as well. Our goal here is, it's unavoidable that the goal for the argument for social distancing doesn't work so well in a van pool, right? I believe some people somewhere have done some measurements, and in something like a 7-passenger van, the only amount of people you can get in a 7-passenger van, if you're keeping 6 feet of distance, is 1 in the front seat and 1 in the trunk. So that it doesn't functionally work. So our goal is to be able to provide you with the PPE if you are not able to procure it yourself, so that there's one less bar that you have to overcome in order to be able to get people to get back on the van. So you should be getting that next week, and hopefully that is useful to you guys. It's also worth mentioning that as of tomorrow morning, which will be the end of the reporting period for June. So we'll begin our annual NTD reporting phase. That is the end of FY20 for us in terms of our data gathering. And so those of you who have been in the program for more than 1 year are familiar with our long and exhaustive spreadsheets. And you will be hearing from us in relatively short order. I have to say, I think that last year it went as smooth as it could possibly have gone, which is probably due in no small part to the fact that I didn't have anything to do with it. The senior Vanpool program assistant, Bonnie Doherty, who some of you may know, has been out on maternity leave for the last couple of months. So Denise and I have been kind of flying at a reduced capacity. She, when she comes back, which will be in about a week or so from now, this will be her predominant task. So you will all be hearing from her just as you did last year, and you will have exactly the same window of time as you had last year, probably through, my guess is the end of September, something like that, to get that information taken care of. And so you all know that, so I won't belabor it. One other thing I do want to mention is the I-66 commuter choice parking benefit for the urban core. We did at the last, back in the before time when we could have actual in-person meetings, at the last one of these, a couple of people, I know Linda Jeck mentioned it, and I think someone else also kind of seconded it, when we asked for ideas for potential funding. We discovered that costs for Vanpools in the core is a major impediment towards actually starting a Vanpool. Being able to spend the $200, $300, $400 a month in parking that it's going to cost. And so we actually did apply for some commuter choice funding for vehicles that would be taking I-66 inside the Beltway to the core. And the idea is that we would also be applying for funding for I-395, 95 as well, so that we could have those operating at the same time. The I-66 commuter choice application that we put in was approved. However, it is not active yet because, of course, a lot of the ability to be able to have those projects is dependent upon the disbursement of an income of toll revenue, which, of course, given the prevailing lack of traffic that, as Susan in those wonderful graphs was showing in many places, that impacts toll revenue. And so they've been doing some machinations there to actually figure out how many of these projects they're actually going to be able to honor. But certainly our application was approved, and that's something where you should very much watch this space in terms of, a potential extra value add that we have that kind of, again, lowers the bar towards making it easier for you guys to start vans that are going into, Arlington, going into DC, places where you're looking at spending a lot for parking for vans. So that's just a very quick kind of 40,000 foot view for me for where we are. Obviously, I have our contact information here as well. That's it in terms of our formalized plan for what we're talking about. So certainly we can go into questions now, and if people want to go ahead and unmute themselves, and if they want to ask a question, go right ahead. And this is not just for me or Holly. This can certainly be for Susan or Hugh or Annette or Desra. And hopefully people have some questions.
Hey, Joe.
Yes.
If you don't mind, not so much a question, but I would like to say something, and a lot of this I put together before your State of the Vanpool Union address, so forgive me if I'm changing things at the last moment.
It's all good.
First of all, for Miss Jackson, Yvonne and I go back many, many years. I know that she was in vanpooling for at least 22 years. Her best quality was her ability to reason. If I could present an argument to her that was reasonable, she would acquiesce. But if I couldn't, heaven help the ground underneath me because it got really shaky. Anyway, the vanpooling industry has definitely felt her loss, and so has GWI Connect, and I just wanted to say that. Also, I wanted to reiterate what Desra and Holly said about the ACT Vanpool Council. It does a lot of good for vanpooling. I also want to plug that there are at least 3 people on this conference call that are going to be presenters at the ACT National Conference. Teresa, Holly, calling you out. And I do suggest, if you can, to attend that. Also, I want to shine a spotlight on all of the assistance, Joe, that you and your staff have given the Vanpools through your program, because it's been amazing with the continued stipends, with Evra, the personal assistance from your staff with them calling and checking on everybody. It's just been amazing. And you guys have done a lot of good work, and I just wanted to point that out. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I should mention, this is a bad thing that I didn't mention this. So the PPE that we have procured, obviously the very large amount of it that we procured was not inexpensive. That is being paid for by CARES money. The federal government appropriated, I think, overall 22 billion or something like that for transit, and a portion of that did come to Vanpool Alliance because we do report NTD miles, the miles that you guys drive up and down the road and you generate. It's right that you should get some help out of this. So the PPE was purchased using that money. There is also the possibility that we might be able to do other things with that money, whether it's direct payments, although that's looking unlikely from the legalese in terms of actually being able to fund the operating expenses of third-party contractors, but that's getting a bit too in the weeds. But we are looking for other things that we can use that money for to help the Vanpool community. You know, we are abundantly aware, even before we started seeing these tick-ups in Florida and California and Arizona, that there was going to be a very long tail to this whole system, to this whole COVID pandemic. We want to help you guys as much as possible. You know, we right now are going into beginning of FY21, and we have a marketing budget that we spend every year, and we're looking at how best to implement that now and what message to put out there, bearing in mind that the state is not looking to promote ride sharing right now. So we're having to walk kind of a tightrope there to make sure that we're, you know, being responsible in what we are promoting. And, you know, is the reality, again, that Hugh mentioned, and that, you know, Felicia has also mentioned in other forums, which is that, you know, a Vanpool can be like your family, right? You know these people. You're going to be much more likely to get into a van with 5 other people than maybe you are potentially into a bus with 55 other people, or onto a train, or into a car, or something like that. But with something like, just to give you an example, with a program like Vanpool Alliance is obviously embedded within a transit agency, right? A transit agency that does a multitude of other things that are not vanpooling. And so we have to be quite careful with our messaging, because of course we do not want, and have never wanted, to get into the aspect of pitting one mode of transit against another. Well, you should take vanpooling because of this, busing is this, trains this, that, and the other. That's not what we are trying to get into. So we're going to be quite careful in how we roll that stuff out, but we are looking at it. We're trying to be smart and spend money where we can. And, you know, when the state as a whole, you know, is more open to the promotion of ride sharing and stuff again, then, you know, we may just be able to not be on the brakes so hard at that point, and we'll be able to roll stuff out. But if you do not see stuff from us and you're thinking, oh, wow, kind of Vanpool Alliance has dropped off the face of the earth, that's not an accidental thing, right? It is deliberate. You know, certainly we would be being more in your face if it was the appropriate time to do that, but we are just trying to be as responsible as we can. So, questions? I'm sure someone's got some. There's too many people on this call to not have a question. I could unmute everybody if someone's having a hard time. I didn't see anything in the chat either. Any questions for anyone? I mean, which means, if not, it just means we've either bored you all to just absolute sleep, or we've just been so fantastically comprehensive in all of our our statements that, you couldn't possibly have any questions. We just, no stone has been left unturned.
It's a very nice evening.
So yes, so if nobody has any questions, it is a glorious evening after another roastingly hot day. And I know that this has been suboptimal. I like seeing everybody. I think most of us like seeing everybody.
In person.
Hopefully very soon, we can all be back together. And this is the first, last, and only virtual Vanpool workshop that we ever have to do. I'm extremely appreciative to all of our presenters, without whom we could not do this. And then also, of course, you guys who call in for it. I hope that we provided useful content. And know that you will be getting a copy of this presentation, a link to this whole session, and we'll have all that stuff for you guys probably tomorrow at this point. And if you ever have any questions about this or anything else, you can always reach out to myself or my staff. And
Well, this is Regina. This is Regina. I want to add that I was on my phone and I called Bryant Lambert. He has joined the conference with us. He is my Mass Transportation Benefits Program Manager, and he deals with Vanpools, and he deals with all those folks taking the BRE and all that. And I just wanted him to listen in. So Bryant, would you just say hey to everyone?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm Brian. I work with Regina and Hugh and Annette. So hopefully you can hear me at the moment.
yes, we can hear you just fine, Brian. Thank you. Thank you for joining. And if you want to take a couple of minutes to say something, you certainly can. If not, I guess we're kind of at the end of things, but certainly we'll make sure that you get a link to where you can see the entire session, and you can hopefully get something valuable out of that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think all I'd add here is that my first time seeing this group, and I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate that vans offer mass transit opportunities to people in regions that don't have other options. It can't be easy to run vans in this region when you've got so much competition with the other transit options. And I also appreciate what you had to say about the YEJ. That was a blow. So, but thank you.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely. I mean, this is. I've been in the business now for 17 years, and Yvonne was one of the first people I met in this business. And it's a loss. I mean, I like to think on some level we're all a family. And so certainly to that end, again, feel free to call me anytime to help with anything. We are here to help. That is quite literally my job. So we are going to do everything that we can with the CARES money and with the strings that come attached to that, and everything else to keep you guys appraised of opportunities, to make sure that your riders are protected as best as they can be against COVID-19, and that when all this blows over, we all have businesses to go back to.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
See
you.
you.